Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karava Vahai Tejasvi Navadhitamastu Ma Vidvisha Vahai. Om Shanti 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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamudirayeta. Good. Welcome back. We'll continue our study in the Sabha, Parva, the second book of the Mahabharata. And we're seeing the end of a very difficult conversation between a parent and child. Does that sound familiar? Have any of you had difficult, on either side, when you were young, you had difficult discussions with your parents, and now those of you who have raised children, you can think of more than a few difficult discussions with your children. So we get it on both sides. Turn this up a little. Here we're seeing a very difficult discussion between Duryodhana and his father Dhritarashtra. Duryodhana is fixed on having this dice game take place. Shakuni had proposed a dice game that would allow Duryodhana to win Yudhishthira's great wealth, and Dhritarashtra displays surprising wisdom in this sequence of verses in his efforts to dissuade his son from making a terrible mistake. And we'll see that in some detail, maybe an introductory comment here. This is all the reason I chose this particular passage is it's a very profound inquiry into human emotions and about the consequences when the emotions aren't handled properly. So we're seeing Duryodhana's primary emotion being one of jealousy, and we're seeing Dhritarashtra's weakness in his inability to deal with his son's emotions. We will see the consequences of that before long. But the comment before we pick up the thread this morning is a mistake we're all likely to make in life. And I certainly have made, certainly in the past. And that is, we're going to see Dhritarashtra making very rational arguments to Duryodhana. Duryodhana, who is driven by his emotions and not responding rationally at all. This is the most common mistake we make, is we deal with emotional people. By the way, emotions are normal or abnormal? Okay, let's be very clear about that. We deal with people's emotions, and then sometimes our response is very rational, and we expect these emotional people to respond rationally to our discussions. And sorry to sound a little silly, it is irrational for us to expect an emotional person to respond rationally. I'm going to say that again. To expect an emotional person to respond rationally, the expectation is irrational. I have to share with you this anecdote. I told this many years ago. A few of you will remember this anecdote. In the early 1990s, I was manager at our ch50, our parent organization in Saylorsburg, in Pennsylvania. And there was a day when the cook came into my office, and she had a whole list of complaints. And she said, this is going wrong, and that is going wrong, and this is a priority. And she was obviously quite upset. And what was my response? I said, well, for the first problem, I'll do this. For the second problem, we'll make that change. And for the third problem, here's the solution. So she had 3 problems. I gave her 3 solutions. I thought my job was done. She proceeded to narrate all of her problems again. Does that sound a little familiar? You see what's going on, and what I didn't understand in those days is the real issue for her was not the details of the problems going on in the kitchen. All the time there were real problems, and they really needed to be addressed. But like medical professionals will use language like this: the presenting problem. The presenting problem, the problem she came into my office with, is she was very upset. She was frustrated. She was hurt. Now look at this. In giving her 3 solutions for her 3 problems, did I respond to her frustration and hurt? This is a mistake we're all likely to make. And that is, we have to acknowledge the reality of emotions. We can't just decide that, that person's emotions are irrational. We sometimes make that judgment. That person is behaving unrationally. They're just being so emotional. Wait a minute. Emotions, is there such a thing as a rational emotion? By definition, emotions are not intellectual. Emotions are feelings. We feel what we feel. There's no such thing as a right emotion or a wrong emotion, a correct emotion or an incorrect emotion. We feel what we feel, and we feel what we feel for hundreds and thousands of reasons. To ignore emotions is a huge mistake. It's equally a huge mistake to let those emotions run our lives. Both are true facts. To ignore emotions is a huge mistake. But to elevate emotions to the highest level of life and say the purpose of life is to address all these emotions, that's also out of balance. And that we saw in a prior class where Duryodhana threatened suicide and Dhritarashtra caved in, as we say. He said, okay, well, we'll go ahead and have the dice game. So this is equally a problem. To ignore Duryodhana's problem, to ignore Duryodhana's emotions would be a mistake. But to merely cave in to those emotions and do whatever Duryodhana once done is equally problematic. Okay, enough said. This is our introduction. So that part of Dhritarashtra caving in to Duryodhana, that was part of our last class. Today we pick up the thread where Dhritarashtra has one last chance. He's already caved in. He's already given instructions for a hall to be constructed, the hall in which the dice game between Shakuni and Yudhishthira will take place. The instructions for that hall to be built has already been given. The hall is being built. But Dhritarashtra knows it's bad news, as it were. It's going to be a horrible disaster if this dice game takes place. So Dhritarashtra has one last chance to talk his son out of this dice game, and that's where we pick up the thread today. Dhritarashtra vacha Dhritarashtra Tvam vai jeshto jayishtineyaha Tvam vai jeshto jayishtiyena Putra mahapandavandvashaha Putra mahapandavandv Dveshta hyasukam adatte Dveshta hyasukam ha Yathaiva nidhanam tata Yathaiva nidhanam tata. We saw part of this verse in the last class. So he tries to address Duryodhana's emotions. He tries, but he starts off, to To be honest, Dhritarashtra is not being particularly effective. And we'll see why he's not being so effective. He begins, Tvam, you, Duryodhana, you are Jeshtaha, you are my eldest son. Not only are you my eldest son, but you are Jaishtineyaha, you are the son of my eldest wife. You are my eldest son and the son of my eldest wife, which means he has the place of privilege in the family. He is the crown prince, so there's no other sibling. How many siblings does he have? 100 brothers. So, by the way, do you think there's ever any fights among those brothers? You can't imagine. So, father says, don't worry about your 100 brothers. You have the place of position. You are the eldest son of my eldest wife, Putra, O son. Therefore, Ma Pandavan Dvishaha. We talked about this in the last class. Ma Dvishaha. Don't hate Pandavan. Don't be hateful towards the Pandavas. The message is, you have everything you want in our family. So who cares about the Pandavas? That's basically the message. And we talked about the problem of this advice in the last class. So just mentioned very briefly, Ma Dvishaha, don't be angry. And we said in the last class, has anyone ever told you that? Don't be angry? You've been angry and somebody has told you don't be angry. Does that help? It makes you more angry, right? It's so absurd. If you're angry, did you choose to be angry? Did you decide, I'm going to be angry now? You didn't choose to be angry. If you didn't choose to be angry, you can't choose not to be angry. So this is the issue of emotions. We feel what we feel. We do not choose our emotions. We do not have direct control over our emotions. We do have some indirect control over our emotions. Absolutely, we have indirect control over our emotions by putting our intellects in a direction which is helpful. By doing so, we can manage our emotions more effectively. But let's be very clear. You cannot choose your emotions. Remember, at the end of the last class, I gave you the challenge. If you can choose your emotions for the next 5 seconds, be very sad. Go ahead. It's just to demonstrate we cannot directly control or choose our emotions. Let's understand that. So when Dhritarashtra tells his son, Ma Dvishaha, don't be angry, it's not very helpful, right? It's well-intended, absolutely well-intended. It's just not very effective. Why? He's not addressing the underlying issue. Why is he angry? So that's the same thing that happened to you. When somebody told you, don't be angry, you were angry for some reason, right? Did the person ask you about the reason you were angry? No, they just said, don't be angry. That is unhelpful. And he continued. So he continues to talk about this anger, dveshta. Dveshta means one who is angry. One who is angry, he indeed, asukam adate. They become unhappy. Anger leads to unhappiness. Seems to be generally true, right? When you were angry, did that make the situation better or worse? Generally, our anger will make a situation, there are exceptions, but generally, our anger will make a situation worse. So Dhritarashtra shares his fatherly wisdom, and he says, anger leads to unhappiness. And yatha eva nidhanam tata. Anger leads to unhappiness not only in life, but nidhanam tata, even in death. That is, an angry person who will be angry until their last moments on this planet, they will be unhappy throughout their lives. Now, on the surface it looks like good advice, but here's the problem, is Dhritarashtra addressing the reason for Duryodhana's anger. It's not. What is the reason for Duryodhana's anger? Jealousy? What is the reason for his jealousy? Yudhishthira has all of he has a big palace and all the gems and gold and jewels and all of this, and Yudhishthira doesn't have it. So is at this point, is Dhritarashtra addressing that? Not yet, but he's going to address it. And he's going to address it now in the next verse, which means Dhritarashtra's strategy is improving. He starts off not very effective, don't be angry, and now he gets a little bit more effective. In fact, as we go on, he's going to get more and more effective as he goes on. We'll see. So he continues. Tuya bhijana viryascha, tuya bhijana vir, katam bhratu shriyam nripa, katam bhratu shriyam, putra kamaya se mohan, putra kamaya Maivam bhushamya sadviha, maivam bhushamya sadviha. Well, the last line, we'll see in just a moment. The last line is not so good, but he opens up more effectively. He tells his son, he addresses, first of all, he addresses his son Nripa, O king, O crown prince. So this is kind of a building up Duryodhana's ego. Nripa, O king to be. Katam, he says, first line, he says, you are tulya abhijana viryahacha. With regard to Yudhishthira and the Pandavas as a whole, he says, Duryodhana, you are tulya, you are their equal. You are their equal with regard to abhijana, place of the status of birth. Abhijana means status of birth. You are equal to them in the status of your birth, and you are equal to them in your virya, in your courage and strength. You are their equals. The point is saying, why should you be jealous of them? You're as good as them. That's a better argument, right? So Dhritarashtra is making a better argument here, and he continues. He says, Katam, why? Putra, O son. Katam, why? Kamaya se, why do you desire, why do you covet, why do you long for Bhratuhu Shriyam, your brother's wealth, Yudhishthira's wealth? Why do you covet Yudhishthira's wealth? Why are you jealous because of Yudhishthira's great wealth? He said, and he actually gives a reason. Why are you jealous of Yudhishthira's wealth? Mohan, mohat, breaking the sandhi, due to confusion. Due to the fact that you don't recognize, Duryodhana, you fail to recognize that you're their equal. You are equal to Yudhishthira and the others in all measures. So therefore, why are you jealous of them? There's no reason to be jealous of them. That's actually an appropriate argument. But now Dhritarashtra lapses back. By the way, when you were a parent dealing with a child and having discussions, you probably had the same thing. Some of your arguments were good. Some of your arguments may not have been so good, and that's what we're saying in Yudhishthira. Dhritarashtra makes a good argument. Oh, Duryodhana, there's no reason for your jealousy. You are their equal in all regards. It's a good argument. But now look how he concludes. Ma evam bhuhu. Literally, ma evam bhuhu. Literally, don't be like that. Ma evam bhuhu. Don't be like that. Shamya. Settle down. Quiet down. Or as youngsters today say, chill. Shamya. Settle down. And sadhu sadhu here it's an adverb meaning completely. Sadhu shamya, settle down completely now. So the first part was quite good, but then he says, don't be like that. Has anyone ever told you that? How is that helpful? Ma evam bhuhu. Don't be like that. He is like that. Accept it and deal with it. Accept it doesn't mean to ignore it. Accept it means to deal with the reality of Duryodhana's jealousy. Okay. Dhritarashtra is still trying. And he uses some of his kingly wisdom, things that he's learned. Anartha charitam tata, anartha charitam, parasva sprihanam bhrisham, parasva sprihanam, swasantushta swadharmastho, swasantushta swadharmastho. Yasavai sukham edhate, yasavai sukham edhate. Start in the second line. Parasva sprihanam. Sprihanam, longing for, desiring. Longing for what? Parasva, the possessions of another. Longing for the possessions of another. Specifically, Duryodhana is longing for the great wealth and glory of Yudhishthira. Notice it's such a predictable rivalry, right? So Duryodhana is the eldest son of Dhritarashtra. Who is the eldest son of Pandu? Yudhishthira. And who has a position of place in both families is Duryodhana and Yudhishthira. They're technically they're cousins, but they're cousins engaged in great rivalry or competition. This happens commonly in families. It not only in families, now in modern times, it happens in like corporate workplaces among colleagues. The colleagues are, you can imagine just what a memory. The head of one department doing battle with the head of another department. I can't believe it that actually takes place. In the 1970s, I worked as an engineer in California. And I still remember being absolutely, I was working for what big aerospace corporation. One of the big aerospace corporations. I was a young engineer, just out of college. And they were asking me to work on a project. I was working on a project. I discovered that in the other department, they're working on the same project. I said, why are we working on this project when they're working on this exactly the same project in the other department? You can imagine what happened is that the two department heads had a rivalry with each other. They were in competition. They both wanted to pull off the project and be successful and make the other guy look bad. This goes on in corporate America. How ineffective is that? I'm not, the kind of competition that drives American economy, there's some good to it, there's no doubt. I mean, to be in a free economy, which depends on competition, is a good thing. We acknowledge that. But we're not talking about competition of a free economy. We're talking about the problems of jealousy and rivalry. Those are the problems. So, and that is certainly Duryodhana's problem. And this is the issue. He is jealous of Yudhishthira's wealth and glorious position. So his father, Dhritarashtra, says, Parasva sprihanam, longing for the wealth of others, brisham, intensely longing for the wealth of others, is what? Anartha acharitam. It is acharitam. It leads to anartha. It leads to disaster. Tata, O dear one, longing for the wealth of others leads to disaster. Excellent observation. Absolutely a true observation. just a news article that head of that pharmacological corporation, that guy who jacked up the price of a medication by 1,000% or something, a life-saving medication, he jacks up the price 1,000%. Everyone in the country is outraged. And what just happened to him? He just went to jail. Why did he go to jail? Fraud. Parasvasprihanam, longing for the wealth of others. Anartha acharitam, leads to disaster. In his case, leads you to jail. All right. Then, on the other hand, swasantushtaha, so longing for the wealth of others leads to disaster, but on the other hand, swasantushtaha, being content with what you have. Being content with what you have, he says, yaha, one who is content with what he has, sahavai sukham edhate, that person's happiness increases. Swasantushtaha, being happy with what you have, leads to greater contentment. Now, some people will misunderstand the teachings of Hinduism. This is a common complaint, where people will say the teachings of Hinduism lead to passivity. Have you heard that? It's been argued that the doctrine, it's been argued usually by non-Hindus, by some Hindus, but mostly by non-Hindus. It's argued that the doctrine of karma leads to passivity. How is that? They say you're born into a certain condition in life, it's due to your karma, you just have to accept it. That's actually a complete misinterpretation. And you might notice that I strategically skipped one word in this verse, which addresses that misinterpretation. So, swasantushtaha, being content with what you have, leads to contentment. Absolutely. But being content with what you have doesn't mean just being passive and sitting on your hands is a common expression. It doesn't mean being totally inactive. He says, swasantushtaha, being content with what you have, and swadharma staha, being established in your own dharma. Being established in your own dharma means fulfilling your responsibilities. Not merely being content with what you have, but fulfilling your responsibilities is also essential if you are to grow in happiness and contentment in life. And let's be very clear. What does it mean to fulfill your responsibility? It is a responsibility in life for every human being to grow. To grow intellectually, to grow emotionally, to grow spiritually, and to grow in kind of practical, material sense. Why not? Why would we exclude material growth? What is wrong with being more comfortable than you were 10 years ago? It's a natural part of the growth of life. We would say that is swadharma for almost everyone. There are a few people who are excluded from that growing materially. No one is excluded from growing emotionally, growing intellectually, and growing spiritually. But there's one category of people who are excluded from growing materially, people who wear this dress. Unless you're wearing this dress, growing materially is swadharma. It is. And that, by the way, I don't think I'm making this stuff up. This comes from the Vedas. You've all heard of the Chatur Purushartha, the 4 goals of life. What are the dharma? Artha, kama, moksha. What is that, artha? It means material growth. material growth is so important it makes it into the list of the 4 goals of life. So, let's be very clear. To grow not only emotionally, not only intellectually, not only spiritually, but even to grow materially, unless you're a sannyasi, is considered a valid and important goal of life, which means to neglect it is adharma. So, do you see any room here for passivity? For sitting on your hands? No room at all. So those who have criticized Hinduism as a doctrine leading to passivity, they make that argument because they haven't really fully understood what Hinduism teaches. So Dhritarashtra's next argument is swasantushtaha, one who is content with what you have, instead of longing for what others have, to be content with what you have, but to also be swadharmastaha, to be established in your own dharma, which includes material growth. Yaha, one who is like that, saha sukham edhate, that person's happiness grows, that person becomes more happy and content. Next argument. Avyapara pararteshu, avyapara nityo yoga swakarmasu, nityo yoga udyamo rakshane swesham, udyamo rakshane etad vaibhava lakshanam. Look at the last line. Vaibhava, glory. What is the glory of a person's life? What makes a person great? Vaibhava lakshanam is the definition of a glorious life. Vaibhava lakshanam. So what defines a person as being a great person? What defines a person as having been very accomplished, having achieved everything? Vaibhava lakshanam. So Dhritarashtra is going to give 3 signs, 3 indicators. Lakshana is an indicator. Definition or indicator. So Lakshana is an indicator, 3 indicators of greatness. What is the first indicator of greatness? Vyaparaha pararteshu. Vyapara is effort and activity. Avyapara, the absence of effort and activity. Para arteshu, in getting somebody else's wealth. It's funny, it's like basically not being a thief. A sign of greatness is not being a thief, because he says it is not being engaged in seeking the wealth of others is one of the signs of greatness. But then, the heart of the argument is I said 3 signs, so the heart of the argument is actually the second and third sign. So the second sign of greatness is nitya udyogaha swakarmasu. Udyoga is effort. Nitya udyoga, constant effort. Constant effort in what? Swakarmasu, in your own karma. And here the implication is in your own dharma. Swakarmasu, swadharmasu. To be constantly engaged in fulfilling your responsibilities. What are your responsibilities? We just identified them. Emotional growth, intellectual growth, spiritual growth, and material growth. So to be constantly engaged in fulfilling your responsibilities is the second of the 3 signs of greatness. And the third of the 3 signs of greatness is udyamaha rakshane swesham. Udyama is like udyoga, same sense. Being engaged in rakshane, protecting, swesham, what you already have. Being engaged in protecting what you already have. The second was being engaged in your own dharma, which means acquisition of material things to the extent that it's appropriate. And the third sign was protecting what you have. Second, acquisition. Third, protection of what you have. This is actually a reference to a common expression, yoga kshema. Have you heard that expression? Yoga kshema. It has a special meaning here. Yoga means acquisition. Kshema means protection. Yoga means acquisition of what is dharmic for you. So yoga would mean acquisition of emotional growth, intellectual growth, spiritual growth, and material growth. That is yoga. And then what is kshema? Protecting what you have acquired. Yoga kshema is actually dictated in the Vedas as the goal, as not the goal of life. Well, actually, if you include spiritual growth, that really includes all four purusharthas. Remember those four purusharthas: dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Kama means worldly pleasure. Worldly pleasures that are not contrary to dharma are considered a legitimate and valid goal of life. Artha, wealth and security. Without wealth and security, how are you going to have any pleasure? So, pleasure and wealth are considered legitimate goals of life so long as they are in keeping with dharma, which is why the first of the list of four goals of life is what? Dharma. So dharma, artha, kama, and the last of the four is moksha. Moksha, spiritual growth. So these the second and third of these three signs of greatness really encompass all four of those goals of life: dharma, artha, kama, moksha. It's also expressed in that with those two words, yoga and kshema. Yoga, acquiring what is worth acquiring in life, which means what? Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. That's yoga. And then kshema, protecting what you've acquired. These are the second and third of the signs of greatness. And what is the first sign of greatness? Don't be a thief. Don't make an effort to get other people's wealth, which means be dharmic, follow dharma, which we're going to see. That point is going to be reiterated in the, actually not in the next verse, and actually we'll see that when Duryodhana starts talking. We'll talk more about dharma in a few minutes when Duryodhana responds. Before his response, Dhritarashtra concludes his argument with this verse. So this verse is Dhritarashtra's last gasp, trying to dissuade his son Duryodhana from the dice game, which he knows is going to be a disaster. So Dhritarashtra concludes, Vipatishva vyato daksho, Vyapatishva daksho, Nityam huttanavan naraha, Nityam huttanavan, Apramatto vinhitatma, Apramatto vinhitat, Nityam bhadrani pashyati, Nityam bhadrani pashyati. So here, Dhritarashtra describes what is a truly mature person. He's encouraging his son, basically he's encouraging his son to grow up. His son Duryodhana is behaving like an impulsive child. Look what I wonder what kind of slang, what kind of casual language. Look what Yudhi has. Yudhishthira. Look, so Duryodhana, like a child, Look what Yudhi has. I don't have anything. Yudhi has everything. I don't have any. He's behaving like a child. I want to cheat Yudhi out of his wealth with a dice game. This is a very childish thinking. So Dhritarashtra is trying his best to help his son grow up. And so what he does in this final verse is he tells what real maturity is. Duryodhana is lacking this real maturity. What is real maturity? He says real maturity is vipattishu avyataha. One who is avyataha, undisturbed, vipattishu, in a crisis. One who is undisturbed in a crisis. Duryodhana feels he's in a crisis. What is a crisis? The crisis is Yudhishthira when he completed his Rajasuya Yajna. Yudhishthira's status went up through the ceiling, so to speak. That became a crisis for Duryodhana. Prior to the Rajasuya Yajna, Duryodhana felt that he was more or less on an equal footing with his cousin, so the competition wasn't so bad. But when Yudhishthira completed his Rajasuya Yajna, he received so many tributes and wealth from all the neighboring kingdoms that Yudhishthira's status went way up, and Duryodhana felt like his status went way down. That was his emotional feeling. So Dhritarashtra, his father, says that real maturity is when you are avyataha, when you are undisturbed. Vipattishu, no matter what happens, you are undisturbed. The mark of a great mature person is not to be disturbed in these moments of crisis. Just imagine, suppose the president of our country were easily disturbed. By the way, when you look at the candidates for next election, can you imagine if some of those guys got elected? Do you see them as having the kind of stability that in a moment of crisis they're going to have a cool head? God save us if any of those guys got elected. It would seem like our current president seems to have this kind of maturity. That is, vipattishu, in a moment of crisis, he is avyataha, he is undisturbed, he keeps a cool head. And for a person in a position of power, that's a very important quality. Who is going to be the next king? Duryodhana. If Duryodhana is unable to keep a cool head in a moment of crisis, is he qualified to be the next king? This is the issue. So, Father says, one who is truly great and mature is one who is avyataha, undisturbed, vipattishu, in any kind of crisis. One who is dakshaha, skillful. By the way, even if you are skillful and you're hot-headed, when your emotions get stirred up, what happens to all of your skill? It becomes inaccessible. If you're caught up by your emotions, whatever skills you have get overwhelmed by the emotions. They become useless. So one who is undisturbed in crisis, one who is dakshaha, skillful, one who is nityam uttanavan, naraha. Naraha, a person who is uttanavan, who is always striving, always engaged in making an effort to follow dharma, nityam, always. Always uttanavan, always striving for dharma. Always, I should say, always striving for those four goals of life in a dharmic fashion. And finally, a person who is this great person, a mature person? A person who is apramattaha, undiluted, clear thinking, one whose mind is not... This translation is good. One who is vigilant. apramattaha. Vigilant in this sense. In a moment of crisis, our minds get thrown off. And when our minds are caught up in the emotions of a situation, we become blind to certain issues. We get caught up. It's like when the fire is over here, you ignore what's over there. But what happens is there might be a fire over here, but there's a bigger problem over there. So by being focused on a small problem, we can ignore a much bigger problem. And apramattaha means not to be like that. Not to be disturbed by a small problem to the extent that you lose sight of the big picture. In fact, that's a nice expression here. Apramattaha, vigilant in the sense of never losing sight of the big picture. It's a problem that almost all of us are subject to. You get caught up in the details of a problem, and the problem looms very large in your mind, and you forget that this is just a little problem. We lose perspective. Apramattaha is a person that doesn't lose perspective, a person who always appreciates the big picture. And vinitatma. Here atma means simply oneself. Vinita means controlled. Vinitatma, one who is self-controlled. Self-controlled means not being carried away by your emotions and not entering into this childish rivalry which Duryodhana has towards his cousin Yudhishthira. Finally, and what about that person? A person who is undisturbed in crisis, a person who is skillful, a person who is always striving for dharma, a person who is always vigilant, always seeing the picture, a person who is always self-controlled. What about that person? Pashyati bhadrani. They see what is auspicious, they experience what is auspicious, nityam, always. Their lives are always blessed. One who is mature, one who is wise, that person's life will be blessed. So with this, Dhritarashtra concludes what do they call it? Last-ditch effort to dissuade Duryodhana from the dice game. Do you think his effort is successful? You all know the story. It's not successful. Let's see why not. Duryodhana vacha Duryodhana Janan vai mohayasi mam Janan vai mohayasi mam Navi nauriva samyata Navi nauriva samyata Swarte kim navadhanam te Swarte kim navadhanam te Utaho dveshti mam bhavan Utaho dveshti mam bhavan. So this is Duryodhana's response to his father's wisdom. He got that fatherly wisdom, and Duryodhana's response is, Janan vai, you understand so much. You can just imagine the sarcasm. Janan vai, you are so wise, you understand so much, but in spite of that, mohayasi mam, you confound me. You seem to be so wise. Mohayasi means literally you delude me, you confuse me, you confound me. Here's the sense. Janan vai, if you spoke American English, hey Dad, you think you're so smart, but you don't understand me. That's the sense. You think you're so smart, but you don't understand me. Mohayasi mam, you confound me. The sense is you don't understand me. And then he says, this is really, I think this is really touching. He says, Navi nauhu eva samyata. Now is a boat. So now a boat, which is samyata, connected to navi, another boat. He says, Dad, we are like two boats tied together in the ocean. What is the sense? If one boat goes in that direction, the other boat gets dragged along. And this is Duryodhana's complaint. Dad, we are like two boats tied together, meaning you are trying to drag me. Sounds like a typical teenager, doesn't it? You are trying to drag me in a direction you want to go. You are not giving me the freedom to do what I want to do. We have to cut the two boats apart, is what he's suggesting here. But we know that these two boats are tied together. One of the bonds tying the two boats together is a bond of karma. Duryodhana is born to Dhritarashtra, so they are karmically connected, and because of that karmic connection, Duryodhana feels intense frustration that his father is trying to control his life. Sounds familiar? This is life. Several of you have remarked to me, you said, Swamiji, we're reading a 2,000-year-old story, and the observation is people behaved the same back then as they do today. Absolutely. Human emotions haven't changed one iota. Not one iota. We behave emotionally the same today as we did thousands of years, which is why this is so relevant today. If this wasn't so relevant, we wouldn't be studying this passage. But it's absolutely relevant to understanding the problems. Problems in families, problems of emotions, problems of people in general. So he says, "Oh, Dad, you think you know everything, but you don't understand me." That would be a nice translation. It says, we are like two boats tied together, which means you are trying to force me into your mold, as it were. And now he concludes, he says, why is Dad doing this? He wonders, why would my father be dragging me in a direction? Remember, Duryodhana thinks that the direction father is dragging him is absolutely against everything Duryodhana wants. So from Duryodhana's standpoint, we'll try to get inside his head a little bit. He feels, why is my father acting like my enemy? Why is my father thwarting my dreams and aspirations? Why is my father acting against my best interests? And Duryodhana's argument now to his father is actually a little bit sophisticated. He says, it's not, we'll see in just a moment in the verse, but Duryodhana is going to say, to have this dice game, to gain Yudhishthira's wealth, is not only in Duryodhana's best interest, it's also in Dhritarashtra's best interest, right? Financially it is. Yeah, the problem, if you ignore the problem of the impending war, if you ignore that, from a purely financial standpoint, it would be in Dhritarashtra's best interest. And that's why Duryodhana says, Swarte kim na avadhanam te. In fact, the sarcasm continues. The first line was, you seem to know everything, why don't you understand me? That was his opening line. And now he says, kim na avadhanam, don't you understand? Boy, does that sound like typical teenager, doesn't it? Na avadhanam te. Don't you understand, swarte, that this is in your own best interest? Don't you understand? You don't understand me? Not only do you not understand me, you don't understand that this dice game is in your best interest. So Duryodhana says, why are you opposing me? Is it that you don't understand what is in your best interest, or uta, or aho? Aho means, oh God. Oh my God. Or is it dveshti mam bhavan? Or is it that you don't understand what's in your best interest, or do you just hate me? I'm being literal. That's what he says. And he said, bhavan, oh sir, is it that... It's dripping, if you get the Sanskrit, it's dripping with sarcasm. Let me paraphrase the whole verse. He says, hey dad, you think you're so smart, but you absolutely don't understand me. But we are stuck in this together, and I can't get out. Tell me, which is it? Is it that you don't understand, why are you opposing me in this matter? Is it that you don't understand what is in your best interest? Or, sir, is it that you hate me? How's that? I'm playing with this a little bit to help you get the emotional sense of what's being communicated by the Sanskrit. It is dripping with sarcasm and anger and frustration. Okay. He says, Kshatriyasya Maharaja, Kshatriyasya Jaye Vrittis Samahita, Jaye Vrittis Samahita, Savai Dharmo Swadharmo Va, Savai Dharmo Swadharmo, Swavrittau Bharatar Shabha, Swavrittau Bharatar Shabha. So now, Duryodhana is going to give his own arguments. He's just going to have a couple of verses left. Now, what are Duryodhana's arguments? His argument is, Maharaja, O great king, Kshatriyasya, for a Kshatriya, for a warrior, for a member of that caste, as they are, Kshatriya, for a Kshatriya, the Vrittihi Samahita. Vritti here means activities, efforts. Efforts Samahita are supposed to be focused on Jaye, on Jaya. The focus of a Kshatriya should be on becoming victorious. You see his argument. He says, we are born in the Kshatriya clan. Kshatriyas are supposed to be victorious over all their enemies, and Yudhishthira and the Pandavas are my enemy, so therefore I should conquer them. This is the argument. But now here's the problem. Pandavas are not the enemy. He's got the wrong enemy. We had this discussion long ago. What is the real enemy here? The real enemy is Duryodhana's own jealousy. That's the real enemy, is his jealousy. But he hasn't understood, due to his lack of maturity, Duryodhana hasn't understood the real enemy. He thinks the Pandavas in general and Yudhishthira in particular are his enemies. And he says, Jaye Vrittihi Samahita, as a Kshatriya, I should be focused on conquering my enemies. And you might say, but that's not the enemy, to fight against your own family members, your own cousins. Isn't that adharmic? You would ask, isn't that adharmic? And what is Duryodhana's response? To paraphrase, who cares? He says, Sahavai dharmaha, that might be dharmic. Astu adharmaha vai, or it might be adharmic. To be victorious is the goal, whether it is done following dharma or not. You see the problem here. This is, in modern times we call this moral relativism, where we don't make following dharma the overriding principle. And that's, in Hindu ethics, you can do anything you want as long as it is dharmic. Do anything you want as long as it conforms to dharma. And the essence of dharma is not hurting, not causing injury. Ahimsa paramo dharma. But here, Duryodhana says, instead of saying following dharma is the ultimate principle, Duryodhana says being victorious is the ultimate principle. You see the problem we're getting into. So he says being victorious is what's important, whether it's done following dharma or whether it's done contrary to dharma. He says svavrittau, in one's own activities, whether you follow dharma or not, being victorious is what's important. Bharatarshava, O great king, what's important is not following dharma. What's important is being victorious, and here's the problem. There's one statement that comes elsewhere in the Mahabharata that you may know, you should know. There's a famous statement. Dharmo rakshati rakshitaha. Dharmaha. Dharma protects. Dharma protects rakshitaha when it is protected. And I'll explain that in a moment. Dharma protects when it is protected. When dharma is protected means what? When dharma is followed. To protect dharma means what? To follow dharma. Dharma protects you when you follow dharma. This is a fundamental principle. Dharma, living a life of dharma, will protect you, will make your life better when you follow dharma. But now turn it around, and that is, if you don't follow dharma, dharma won't protect you. If you fail to follow dharma, dharma will defeat you. One who fails to follow dharma goes against the grain, so to speak, enters into a life of conflict and creates great suffering for oneself. So Duryodhana, his thinking is fundamentally flawed here. If he thinks he wants to be victorious, ignoring dharma, but he wants to be, in fact, we return, with the next verse, we're going to return to his original argument. And that is, he has lost track of what is really the goal of life. The goal of life is inner peace, contentment. And Duryodhana has lost track of that. Duryodhana thinks the goal of life is not peace and contentment. The goal of life is to be victorious. But tell me, if you're victorious and you're miserable, have you accomplished what you want? This is how confused Duryodhana's thinking is. He's really lost track of what is truly valuable in life. And we see that so clearly in the next verse. In the next verse, he returns to an argument he made earlier. He says, Asantosha shriyo mulam, asantosha shriyo mu, tasmatam kamayam yaham, tasmat kamayam samuchrehe yo yatate samuchrehe yo yatate sarajan paramo nayi asantoshaha shriyaha mulam. Dissatisfaction leads to wealth. He said that before. And he's saying that again. This is Duryodhana's personal philosophy. His personal philosophy is discontentment leads to material gain. And we said that it's a dangerous statement because on the surface it looks correct. Someone who is discontent will definitely strive for material gain or whatever. But then, is the goal of life merely material wealth? I thought the goal of life is to be happy and content. That's what he fails to recognize. Somebody very sarcastically said, the goal of life, what is it? whoever dies with the most toys wins. It's a very sarcastic statement. Whoever dies with the most toys. Toys means all worldly possessions. Whoever dies with the most toys wins. Will you agree to that philosophy? But that is Duryodhana's philosophy. So he says, asantoshaha, discontentment, shriyaha mulam, is the root of wealth. Discontentment will cause you to strive for wealth. Tasmat, therefore, tam kamayami aham. Therefore, aham, I, kamayami, I want tam, that. I want that victory. I want Yudhishthira's wealth. Why? Because my discontentment will lead me to the greatness and glory that I want. And he says, Samyaha yatate, one who strives, samuchreye, one who strives for greatness, Rajan, O king, saha paramo nayi, that person has the best policy, nayi. One who strives for greatness has the best policy of life. You can be great and be absolutely miserable. You can see how misguided he is. Being famous, being wealthy, being powerful, and being totally miserable. Does that sound worth achieving? Absolutely not. So this is Duryodhana's blind spot. He fails to recognize that merely being wealthy and famous is not enough. Inner peace, joy, happiness, much better describe the goal of life. And this leads us to the final verse of the chapter. Duryodhana concludes, Na prapya pandavaishwaryam, Na prapya pandavaishwaryam, Samshayo me bhavishyati, Samshayo me bhavishyam, Avapsyeva shriyam tamhi, Avapsyeva shriyam tamhi, Sheshyeva nihato yodhi, Sheshyeva nihato yadhi. So Duryodhana accurately describes his thinking here. He says, aprapya, if I fail to gain Pandava Aishwaryam, if I fail to gain the glory and wealth of the Pandavas, Yudhishthira in particular, if I fail to gain Yudhishthira's wealth, then what? Samshayaha me bhavishyati. Then I will be troubled by doubts. Na aprapya. If I fail to gain the wealth of Yudhishthira, if I don't gain Yudhishthira's wealth in his dice game, then I will live my life troubled by doubt, self-doubt. Oh, I should have done that. I should have done this. People who are like that. I should have done this. I should have done this. And Duryodhana doesn't want to be stuck with that self-doubt. So Duryodhana is going to commit himself to the dice game at any cost. And at any cost means at any cost. Look at his concluding statement. He says, Avapsyeva shriyam tam, he says, tam shriyam, Yudhishthira's wealth, avapsyeva, either I will gain Yudhishthira's wealth, va, or nihataha, being killed, I will sheshye, I will lay yudhi, on the battlefield, dead. So his final statement to his father, he says, either I will gain Yudhishthira's wealth, or I will lie dead on the battlefield, one or the other. This sounds like I'm sorry to make this metaphor sounds like the problem of terrorism we face today. When somebody's mind is so poisoned and so confused, so misled, they're led to make this kind of commitment. Either I will kill the kafirs, or I will sacrifice myself, I will die. It's the mindset of a terrorist. And Duryodhana's mind has been poisoned in the same way. It's a total distortion of thinking. And a final comment here is, notice in this whole discussion, we have not once used the word evil. Not once. Why? In this tradition, there is no such thing as evil. The concept of evil is a biblical concept. It's not a Hindu concept. Evil, according to the biblical mindset, evil is a force out there. There's a force of evil. Here, what is the problem? The fundamental problem Duryodhana has is one of ignorance, confusion, wrong thinking. So, the Hindu tradition does not accept that anyone could be evil. There is no evil person on this planet, never has been, never will be. In fact, Hinduism teaches everyone is divine. Then how do we explain divine people committing terrible acts of terrorism? Isn't that what we're studying? We're studying how ignorance and wrong thinking can poison minds, can pervert thinking, and lead to tragedy. And that's what's happening to Duryodhana. We're seeing Duryodhana slip away in the direction that's going to culminate in tragedy for so many, and will eventually culminate in Duryodhana's own death. So we wouldn't say Duryodhana is evil. We can't say. We can say, however, his mind has been poisoned by his jealousy, by his thirst for wealth, and his thinking has been totally perverted as a result. Okay. With this, we come to the end of this passage dealing with Dhritarashtra's weakness and Duryodhana's envy. This passage comes to an end. When we meet next time, we'll continue the story. Actually, the story is going to continue after the dice game. And I'll fill you in on what happens in between briefly. But we're going to pick it up when the Pandavas have been exiled to the forest and they're suffering great loss. That's our next topic. How to cope with great loss, as the Pandavas have lost the kingdom, and we'll see that in our next class. By the way, the next handouts are on our website if you want to get a copy of that. Some announcements. Tomorrow, Sunday at 11 o'clock is our program for children. 5 o'clock, our mindful awareness meditation continues. At 6:15, I'll conduct a question-answer session, satsang. This coming Friday, and by the way, I apologize, I forgot to announce this last time. On the second and fourth Fridays, we now have our Sadhaka Sangha program. This is a really nice program for those who are free during the daytime, like retired people, etc. So if you're free during the daytime and you want some satsanga, nice program that our Vasanti is conducting. It meets this coming Friday at 10 a.m. She tells me that she had asked the attendees, do you want to cancel because next Friday is Christmas Day? No, we want to come. So they're very enthusiastic. So you're all, if you're free, by the way, you're all going to be free on that day. No one works on Christmas Day. So you are all invited. Imagine how amazed Vasanti will be when 100 of you show up for the Sadhaka Sangha program. Anyway, the program is next Friday at 10 a.m. It is a nice program. They do some mindful movement, not exactly exercise, like a little bit of yoga, but more focused on mindful movement is the right word for it. They do some chanting. They have some discussion. It's quite a nice program. So that's Friday at 10 a.m. The following Friday, by the way, is New Year's Eve, and New Year's Day, excuse me. The following Friday is New Year's Day. Of course, we'll have a wonderful program. Please plan on joining us for our New Year's Day program. There's also a sign-up sheet on the counter for bringing food. If you're coming, bring a dish of food. A special announcement. Our community is aging, and there are people with health problems, and we have some concern about people who should have a health crisis while they're here at our ashram. We've had a number of people donate medical equipment so that we can do some first aid here. And Dr. Dadania was kind enough to donate a defibrillator. I hope I pronounced that right. So, and what we're going to do immediately after class, we're going to show a brief video on how to use that defibrillator. So any of you who are, if you're a regular student and if you'd like to know how to use this defibrillator, you can please join us. It's a 15-minute video. And we'll see the video just so that we're informed. I also want to see it. There's one person who's pretty regular in classes here. So I figure I should probably know how to use a defibrillator as well. So anyway, if you would like to be educated in the use, by the way, it's located in the lobby closet. The device is there. These devices are found today in airports and all public places, so it's good that we have one here. So if you want to watch the video, please stay back after, just so we can plan. How many of you think you might stay back? Okay, we'll meet in the old hall. And we'll meet immediately after class. So I'll excuse myself after Arati. We'll go into the old hall and we'll see the video. Library will be open after class. We'll conclude with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Tat Sat.